I ran down that hallway like the world was ending. My shoes echoed against the linoleum floor, that hollow sound that only exists in hospitals, mixed with the smell of disinfectant that burned my throat. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples and my neck, in every inch of my 66-year-old body that suddenly felt 1,000 years old. Robert, my son, my only son. Emergency admission. Those words had come over the phone just 40 minutes ago, and since then, I hadn't stopped shaking. I clutched my purse against my chest as I rounded a corner, desperately searching for the room number they had given me. 3. 123 12. The numbers were blurring on the door plaques. 308, 310. I was close. I could breathe. I could see him. I could hug him and tell him everything would be okay, just like I had done his whole life. Because that's what mothers do, right? We fix what's broken. We heal what hurts. We give everything, absolutely everything, expecting nothing in return. And I had given so much that sometimes I wondered if there was anything left of myself underneath all those layers of sacrifice. But at that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was reaching that room, seeing my son, knowing what had happened. The phone had rung while I was making dinner. I had dropped the spoon into the pot when I heard Scarlett's cold voice on the other end. Robert is in the hospital. Accident. Come if you want. And she had hung up. Just like that, without telling me what kind of accident, how serious it was, if he was conscious or not. Just those sharp words and that tone she always used with me, as if I were a nuisance, as if my existence were an inconvenience in her perfect life with my son. But there was no time to think about that now. 311. I was almost there. My hands were trembling as I smoothed down my coat as I tried to control my ragged breathing. I had to be strong for him. I had to be the mother I had always been, the mother who never fails, the mother who is always there even when no one sees her, even when no one thanks her. That's when I felt it. A firm hand grabbed my arm and pulled me aside with surprising strength. I almost screamed in surprise, but another hand was gently placed over my mouth while a female voice whispered urgently in my ear, "Hide and wait. Trust me." It was a nurse. I knew it from the uniform I caught a glimpse of, from the smell of medicinal soap that emanated from her. She looked about 40. Serious face, dark eyes that shone with a strange intensity. She pushed me carefully but firmly toward the half-open door of room 311 right next to where Robert was. "Don't make a sound. Don't come out. Observe and listen. You'll understand everything later." And before I could react, before I could ask her what in the world was going on, she walked quickly down the hall, her shoes making that same rhythmic sound against the floor. I stayed there paralyzed behind that door, my heart now beating for completely different reasons. It was no longer just fear for my son. It was something else, something dark and heavy that I couldn't name yet. The room was empty, dark. It smelled of clean sheets and that artificial air conditioning that dries out your mouth. I leaned against the wall, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand why a strange nurse had hidden me, as if I were in danger. Danger me. It was ridiculous, but something in her eyes, something in the urgency of her voice made me stay put. "Trust me," she had said. And for some reason, I can't explain, I believed her. Maybe because in that moment of absolute desperation, any outstretched hand seemed like a lifeline. Maybe because after so many years of being invisible, of being ignored, someone was finally seeing me, protecting me. Though I didn't know from what. My breathing slowly calmed as my eyes adjusted to the gloom. I could see the silhouette of the empty bed, the IV pole hanging like a metallic skeleton, the closed curtains that let in barely a thin line of light from the hallway. Less than a minute passed, 60 seconds that felt like an eternity. And then I heard them, voices coming from the hallway. Scarlett's voice, unmistakable with that sugary tone she used when she wanted something, and another voice, masculine, unfamiliar, formal. They stopped, right in front of room 312, right across from my hiding place. My entire body went rigid. I held my breath without realizing it. "Are you sure no one will see us here?" the man asked, Scarlett let out a brief dry laugh like the rustling of dead leaves. The old woman is on her way, but she'll still take a while. The guards don't let just anyone through that fast. We have plenty of time. Old woman. She called me an old woman. I felt something tighten in my chest, as if someone was squeezing my heart with their hands. But I forced myself to stay still, to keep listening, because something told me this was just the beginning. Good. Then let's go over the documents one more time. The transfer of the house has to be ready before he wakes up. If he asks anything you say, he signed everything before the accident. Understood. The house. Our house. The house I had bought with my dead husband's inheritance money. The house I put in Robert's name because I trusted him, because he was my son, because I never imagined something like this could happen. $180,000. All my security, all my future handed over on a silver platter because a mother trusts, because a mother gives without calculating. Understood, Scarlett replied. And there was something in her voice that chilled my blood to the bone. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't worry for her husband hospitalized just feet away. It was satisfaction. It was victory. It was the sound of someone winning a game I didn't even know was being played. And what about the business, the $200,000 in the joint account? I can transfer that too. $200,000. The money I had loaned. No, that I had given to Robert so he could set up his imports company. The money he never gave back because, Mom, it's an investment in our future. You'll see. You'll get it back when the business grows. I promise you. But the business had grown. The contracts had come in. The profits had started flowing, and I was still living in my small 2-room apartment, cooking with supermarket specials, wearing the same clothes from 5 years ago, turning off the lights to save on the electricity bill, while they lived in that huge house with a yard and a pool. While Scarlett bought designer handbags that cost more than my 3 months' rent, while Robert changed cars every 2 years like changing shoes. Technically, it's complicated because you are not listed as the account holder, the man said. And then I recognized his profession. Lawyer. He was a damned lawyer. I could picture him in his expensive suit, his leather briefcase, his clean hands that had never done any real work. But if he doesn't wake up in the next few days, or if he wakes up with severe cognitive damage, you can request a temporary guardianship. With thou, you'll have access to everything, absolutely everything. The bank accounts, the properties, the investments. If he doesn't wake up. The words floated in the air like sharp knives. If he doesn't wake up, as if it were an acceptable possibility, as if it were even desirable, as if they were talking about the weather or what to have for dinner tonight. I put my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming, to keep from throwing up right there against that cold hospital wall. My legs were shaking so much I had to steady myself against the door frame. The wood was freezing under my fingers. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. It had to be one of those nightmares where you run but don't move, where you scream but no sound comes out. And her Scarlett asked, and something in the way she pronounced that word, her, made me feel like an insect, like something to be crushed without a second thought. The meddling old woman. Can she claim anything legally? There was a silence that lasted for ages. The lawyer was checking something. Papers, maybe. The crisp sound of paper rustling. Legally, no. According to all the records I checked, she is not listed on any official document. Not for the house, not for the business, not for the accounts. Everything is in your husband's name. And if you are the legitimate wife and he is incapacitated, the law favors you completely. She is nothing. She has no rights. She is just the mother-in-law, a spectator. I am nothing. I have no rights. I am just the mother-in-law, a spectator. The words went through me like ice bullets. 66 years of life reduced to that. 40 years of marriage to a good man who died too soon of a heart attack. No one saw coming. 38 years raising a son I adored more than my own life. All to hear that I am nothing, that I have no right to what I myself built, to what I myself gave with these hands that were now shaking uncontrollably. Scarlett laughed again. That crystalline laugh I had heard 1,000 times at family dinners when she asked me to wash the dishes while she sat with Robert in the living room watching television. That laugh that sounded when I arrived with gifts for them and she barely mumbled a thank you without looking me in the eyes, without getting up from the couch. That laugh I'd mistaken for shyness at first when Robert introduced her to me 7 years ago. How foolish I had been. How blind. How stupid perfect. Then we proceed with the original plan. I've been giving him the crushed pills and his orange juice in the mornings just like you instructed. A little more each week, just half a tablet more. The doctors think it's work. Stress, accumulated fatigue, his poor eating habits. No one suspects a thing. Absolutely nothing. The world stopped completely, as if someone had pressed pause on the entire universe. The pills. She's been giving him pills. To my son, to Robert. To my baby who had grown in my belly, who had nursed at my breast, who had slept in my arms every night of his first 2 years of life. My brain was trying to process what I had just heard, but it was too monstrous, too impossible to believe. This didn't happen in real life. This happened in movies and news stories from other countries and the stories you read on the internet and think, how awful. Thank goodness something like that would never happen to me. But it was happening. It was happening right now, inches from where I was hiding like a scared rat. Here at the hospital, it's even easier, Scarlett continued in that casual, relaxed voice, as if she were talking about a cooking recipe, as if she were sharing a trick for cleaning tough stains. I can add things to the IV when the nurses are out on their rounds. I have access because I'm the wife. No one questions me. Everyone pies me. They bring me coffee. They tell me to be strong. It's almost comical. In 2 or 3 more days, it will all be over. His heart will simply give out. It will look completely natural. It happens all the time with 42-year-old men who work too hard and don't take care of themselves. The statistics are on our side. 42 years old. My son was 42 years old and his wife was planning to kill him like she was planning a vacation. I felt my legs give way. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold floor of that empty room. My hands covered my mouth so tightly I could feel my own teeth against my lips. I couldn't cry. I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't reveal that I was there listening to every word of that hellish conversation. "Excellent," the lawyer said, and I could hear him putting away papers getting ready to leave. "I'll send you the final documents tonight to your email. Sign them digitally and I'll take care of the rest. By Friday of next week, everything will be in your names. The house, the business. The accounts and about the other thing about the hospital plan. I know nothing. Officially, we never had this conversation. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear," Scarlett replied. "You're a genius, Mark. I'll pay you very well when all this is over. Very, very well." Mark. The lawyer's name was Mark. I burned that name into my memory as if carving it into stone. His footsteps receded down the hall. That sound of expensive shoes against cheap linoleum. But Scarlett stayed there. I could hear her breathing. I could feel her presence on the other side of that thin wall separating us. And then she spoke, but this time no one was with her. She was talking to herself, or maybe talking to Robert, who was unconscious in that bed. "Poor fool," she whispered, and her voice was filled with a venom so pure it burned to hear it. "You thought you'd won me over with your cheap flowers and your empty promises. I never loved you. Not for a single day, but you had what I needed. A stupid mother with money, a growing business, a paid-off house, and enough naivety to put everything in your name without any legal protection. You were the perfect target. Every word was a slap. Every sentence was a dagger straight to the heart. 7 years. They had been married 7 years. 7 years of lies. 7 years of acting. 7 years I had believed my son was happy. All those moments I had misinterpreted rushed into my mind. All those signs I had ignored. The times I would visit and Scarlett would disappear into the bedroom with some excuse. The times Robert looked tired, pale, but said it was work. The times I offered to help and he abruptly refused as if my presence bothered him. "Mom, I'm not a kid anymore. I can solve my own problems." But they weren't his problems. It was her. It was the poison he was drinking without knowing it every morning with his orange juice. It was the monster sleeping next to him every night, planning his death while he dreamed of a future that would never come. "And as for you, you meddling old lady," Scarlett went on. And I realized with horror that even though she couldn't see me, she knew I existed. She knew I was an obstacle in her path. As soon as this is over, I'll take you out of our lives forever. You won't have the right to see even his grave because legally you are nothing. You're just the witch who never accepted me, who always looked at me with suspicion, who always tried to sow discord between Robert and me. That wasn't true. I had tried to accept her. God knew I had tried with every fiber of my being because she was the woman my son had chosen, because seeing him happy was the only thing that mattered to me. I had swallowed 1,000 humiliations. I had smiled when she criticized my clothes, my haircut, my cooking. I had washed her dishes after dinners where I wasn't even served a decent plate, where I ate the leftovers standing up in the kitchen while they dined in the dining room. I had bought expensive gifts for her birthdays, for Christmas, for every special occasion. Gifts she opened without emotion and left forgotten in some corner. I had taken care of their house when they went traveling, watering the plants, collecting the mail, dusting. I had been the perfect mother and mother-in-law, the one who doesn't bother, the one who doesn't have an opinion, the one who gives and gives and gives without asking for anything in return. And this was how they repaid me. With poison, with theft, with planned murder. I heard her footsteps finally move away, the sound of her heels against the floor, that constant tapping that had always seemed elegant to me and now sounded like the ticking of a bomb. She was gone. She entered Robert's room and gently closed the door, and I stayed there sitting on the floor of that dark room, shaking like a leaf in the middle of a hurricane. I don't know how much time passed. It could have been seconds or minutes or an entire eternity. Time had ceased to make sense. Everything had ceased to make sense. My entire life, all my decisions, all my sacrifices had crumbled in less than 10 minutes. Like a house of cards, like a mirage that disappears when you get too close. My hands were trembling so much that I had to hug myself to keep from completely falling apart. I felt cold. A cold that came from within, from some deep place I didn't know existed. My teeth were chattering. My entire body shivered with waves of panic that rose from my stomach to my throat. Robert was dying. Not from an accident, not from bad luck. He was being murdered. His own wife was poisoning him day after day, sip after sip, and no one knew it. No one except that mysterious nurse who had hidden me here. That woman who had appeared like an angel, like a divine sign, just in time to save me from walking in there knowing nothing. To save me from confronting Scarlett while she acted out her role as the worried wife, to give me the information I needed, though I didn't know yet what to do with it. What was I supposed to do? Run out and scream? Call the police, go into that room, and scratch that woman's eyes out with my own hands? Every option seemed impossible. Every path seemed to lead to a deeper abyss because she was right about one thing. Legally, I was nothing. I had no proof. I had only overheard a conversation, my word against hers. A hysterical old woman against a young, beautiful wife crying over her sick husband. The door suddenly opened, and I almost had a heart attack right there. It was her, the nurse. She came in quickly, closed the door behind her, and turned on a small lamp in the corner. The dim light allowed me to see her well for the first time. Her face was marked by determination, her eyes bright but serious. Her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, her badge read Leticia Sanchez Specialized Nurse. She looked directly at me and knelt down in front of me, taking my frozen hands in her warm ones. "Breathe," she said in a firm but kind voice. "Breathe deeply. I know you're in shock. I know what you just heard is monstrous, but I need you to calm down. I need you to think clearly because your son doesn't have much time." Her words were like a slap that woke me up. She was right. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. Later there would be time to cry, to scream, to process all of this, but now I had to act. I had to save my son. I took a deep breath once, twice, 3 times. The air came in raggedly, but it came in. My heart was still beating too fast, but at least it was beating. "How did you know?" I managed to ask in a hoarse voice. "How did you know that she—" Leticia sighed and sat on the floor next to me, leaning her back against the wall. "I've been taking care of your son in outpatient consultations for 3 weeks. He came in every 5 days with strange symptoms. Extreme fatigue, dizziness, nausea, irregular heartbeat. The doctors couldn't find anything conclusive. They said it was stress. But I've seen these symptoms before. My sister died this way 4 years ago. Her husband poisoned her with anticoagulants for months. By the time we realized it was too late, her body was destroyed inside. Her voice broke as she said that last part, and I could see the ancient pain shining in her eyes. She had lost her sister, the same horrible way, and now she was trying to save my son. She was trying to prevent another family from living her same nightmare. I started to suspect a week ago, she continued. The wife was always too calm, too controlled. She never cried, never despaired. She only asked about the results, the recovery times, the legal procedures if he became incapacitated. Strange questions for someone who supposedly loves her partner. Then I asked to see his old blood tests from 6 months ago, before the symptoms started, and I compared them with the current ones. There's an enormous difference. His levels of certain substances are completely altered in a way that is not natural, in a way that only happens with intentional and sustained poisoning. Letitia took out her phone and showed me a series of numbers and graphs that I didn't fully understand, but looked terrifying. Red lines going up and down like roller coasters, values that were marked with exclamation points. I talked to Dr. Stevens, the head of toxicology. He's the only one I trust here. I showed him my suspicions. He agreed to investigate discreetly, but we needed more solid proof. We needed to catch her in the act. She showed me her phone again, but this time it wasn't graphs. It was a recording app. She was recording. She had recorded the entire conversation between Scarlett and the lawyer. Every word, every confession, every monstrous detail of their plan. I knew you would come today. Scarlett mentioned it this morning to the other nurses, annoyed because she'd have to deal with the meddling mother-in-law. So I waited in the hallway. I saw you running desperately, and I knew I had to protect you. I had to stop you from going in there without knowing. And I had to get her to confess. And she did. She confessed everything. Tears started rolling down my cheeks uncontrollably. Tears of relief mixed with terror, mixed with infinite gratitude towards this unknown woman who had decided to risk her job, maybe her career, to save my son, to give me a chance to fight. "Thank you," I whispered, and my voice broke into 1,000 pieces. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She squeezed my hands tightly. "Don't thank me yet. This is just beginning. Now we have to act fast and intelligently. Doctor, Stevens is already analyzing your son's IV bag. If he finds evidence of tampering, we will call the police immediately. But we need more. We need to find the pills she's using. We need physical evidence. Where would she keep them?" I asked, trying to think clearly despite the chaos in my head. Probably in her purse or in the car. Women like her are arrogant. They feel untouchable. They don't think anyone could discover them. Letitia stood up and helped me to my feet. My legs were still shaking, but they held my weight. "Listen to me carefully," she said, looking me directly in the eyes with an intensity that made me feel like anything was possible, that we could win this. "You are going to leave here and act like you know nothing. You're going to go to your son's room. You're going to hug that woman if necessary. You're going to cry. You're going to play the role of the desperate mother, which is what she expects to see. Meanwhile, I'm going to talk to hospital security. I'm going to ask them to check the hallway cameras. I'm going to document every time she enters that room alone. And I'm going to make sure she doesn't go near that IV bag again." I nodded, trying to absorb all the instructions. Act pretend? Become what she expected me to be, a foolish, desperate old woman. I could do that. I had been doing that for years without even realizing it. "And one more thing," Letitia added in a low voice. "Don't tell your son anything yet. If he wakes up, if he can talk, don't tell him what you know. He might not believe you. He might think you're exaggerating, that you're jealous, that you're making things up. Men in love are blind, and she's had 7 years to poison him, not only with pills, but also with lies about you." Those words hurt more than I expected, because I knew they were true. Robert had changed with me in recent years. He had become distant, sharp, annoyed by my presence. How many times had he canned lunch with me? How many times had he forgotten my birthday? How many times had he told me he was too busy to visit me? And I had always thought it was work, that it was stress, that it was part of growing up and having your own family. I never imagined it was her whispering poison in his ear every night. She thinks it's his fault that he's sick from working too hard. She's built that narrative perfectly. If you arrive now accusing her of murder, he will defend her and we will lose our chance to save him. She was right. Everything in me wanted to run into that room and shout the truth to my son, shake him until he woke up and saw the viper he had next to him. But I couldn't. I had to be smart. I had to play the game, at least for now. I wiped the tears with the back of my hand. I smoothed down my coat. I took one last deep breath. "It's all right," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I felt. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to pretend. But promise me something. Promise me we won't let her win. Promise me my son will live. Promise me that woman will pay for every drop of poison she gave him, for every lie she told, for every second of suffering she caused." Letitia looked at me with a fierce determination that reminded me why I had trusted her from the very first moment. "I promise you that woman will not only lose everything she planned to steal, she will spend the rest of her life in prison. I will personally see to that." She opened the door carefully, peeking out first to make sure the hallway was clear. She gave me a barely perceptible nod, and I left that room that had been my refuge and my hell for the last few minutes. The hallway was more crowded now. There were more nurses, more doctors, more families waiting for news of their loved ones, all caught up in their own tragedies, unaware that a drama surpassing any soap opera was unfolding feet away. I approached door 312 with steps that didn't feel like my own. It was as if I were floating, as if my body were moving by instinct while my mind was still trapped in that horrible conversation I had heard. My hand touched the cold metal of the door. I took one last deep breath and went in. The room was larger than I had imagined. There were machines, but everywhere, monitors beeping softly, IV bags hanging like frozen tears. And in the center of it all, in that 2-white bed, was my son, my Robert. He looked so small there, so fragile, connected to 1,000 wires and tubes. His skin had a grayish tone that terrified me. His lips were dry. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes that I had never seen before. This wasn't the strong man who had carried my groceries just 2 months ago. This wasn't the boy who had learned to ride his bicycle in the park shouting, "Look, Mom!" hands free while I ran behind him, terrified he would fall. This was someone consumed, someone destroyed from within. And next to his bed, holding his hand with the delicacy I now knew was pure theater, was her. Scarlett looked impeccable as always, her brown hair perfectly styled, her makeup discreet but elegant, her cream-colored dress, which probably cost more than my rent, her green eyes that I had thought were beautiful and now saw as the eyes of a snake. When she saw me enter, her expression changed immediately. Her eyes filled with tears, her mouth trembled. She put her hand to her chest as if holding back a sob. "Doris," she said in a broken voice, and even stood up to hug me. I forced myself to accept that hug, to put my arms around her, to feel her warm body against mine, and not think that this same body had coldly planned my son's death. Her expensive perfume filled my nostrils. It smelled of flowers and lies. "Thank you for coming," she whispered against my shoulder. "I know you had to take 2 buses. I know it's a long way for you, but I needed you to be here. Robert needs you." Liar. Damn liar. She didn't need me here. She had called me only to keep up appearances so no one would suspect when he died that she had kept his mother away. I pulled away from her, gently wiping the tears that were completely real, even if she thought they were for the wrong reasons. "What happened?" I asked, and my voice sounded exactly as it should have, terrified, confused, desperate. Scarlett sighed dramatically and sat back down next to the bed, resuming her role as the devoted wife. He was at the office. According to his colleagues, he suddenly turned very pale. He started sweating. He complained of chest pain and that he couldn't breathe well. They thought it was a heart attack. They called an ambulance immediately. She paused, wiping a tear that was probably as fake as everything about her. "The doctors say his heart is very weak, that he's been under a lot of stress, that he hasn't taken care of himself. I've told him 1,000 times to slow down." That money isn't worth more than his health. But you know how he is stubborn as a mule, just like when he was a kid, I guess. That comment was like a hook. She was trying to connect with me to make me feel like we were a team, that we both loved this man and wanted the best for him. What a perfect actress. What a convincing monster. "What are the doctors saying?" I asked, moving closer to the bed and taking Robert's other hand. It was cold. Too cold. His fingers didn't respond to my touch. "What should we expect that the next 48 hours are critical? That if he wakes up and there's no brain damage, he can recover with time and treatment. If he wakes up." Those words again, but this time coming out of her mouth with a feigned sadness that turned my stomach. But they also said she continued, and now her voice dropped to a lower, more intimate tone, as if sharing a secret with me, that there is a chance he won't wake up, or that he'll wake up but won't be the same. Cognitive damage, they call it. That he might not be able to work again, that he might need permanent care. She was preparing me. She was preparing the ground for when he died so that I would already have in my head that it was possible that it was something the doctors had warned about, so that when it happened, no one would question anything. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood in my mouth, but I couldn't explode. I couldn't reveal what I knew. I had to keep acting. "It can't be," I whispered, letting my voice genuinely break. "He's so young. He has his whole life ahead of him. So much left to do." Scarlett nodded solemnly, wiping another invisible tear. "I know. That's why I've been praying nonstop. That's why I asked Father Thomas to come tomorrow to give him a blessing just in case. Just in case. Just in case he died as she had planned. Just in case the poison finally did its job. Just in case no one noticed in time. But someone had noticed. Letitia had noticed. And now I knew too. And we weren't going to let this happen. "Can I stay for a moment alone with him?" I asked, hoping she would say yes. I needed a break from her toxic presence. I needed to breathe without her perfume invading me. Scarlett hesitated. I saw a shadow of distrust cross her face for barely a second before she put the mask of the understanding daughter-in-law back on. "Of course I'm going to go get some coffee. Do you want anything? Some hot tea? Maybe." I shook my head. "I just want to talk to my son." She nodded and left the room with elegant steps, closing the door softly behind her. As soon as she was out, I collapsed onto the bed, hugging Robert with all the care in the world so as not to disconnect any wires. "Forgive me," I whispered against his hair that smelled of hospital and illness. "Forgive me for not realizing sooner. Forgive me for not protecting you. But I swear on everything I hold dear that I'm not going to let her win. I'm going to get you through this, my love. I'm going to save you even if it's the last thing I do in this life." I kissed his forehead with infinite tenderness, feeling the cold, sweaty skin under my lips. His eyelids trembled slightly, as if somewhere deep in his unconsciousness he could hear me, as if a part of him knew that his mother was there fighting for him as she always had. I dried my tears and sat up just as the door opened again. But it wasn't Scarlett. It was Letitia pushing a cart with medications. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. There was news. "Mrs. Doris," she said in a professional voice, playing her role perfectly. "Could you come with me for a moment? Dr. Stevens wants to speak with you about your son's condition. It will only take a few minutes." I nodded and followed her out of the room, walking down the hallway to a small empty consultation room. As soon as she closed the door, her expression changed completely. She was no longer the kind professional nurse. She was a warrior with crucial information. "We found it," she said without preamble. Dr. Stevens analyzed the IV bag and found traces of wererin. It's a very powerful anticoagulant. In controlled doses, it's used medically, but in the quantities we found, it's designed to cause internal hemorrhaging. The room spun around me. Wererin anticoagulant, internal hemorrhaging. My son was bleeding to death slowly from the inside. And no one had seen it until now. It was not prescribed for him. Letitia continued in a tense voice. Someone added it to the IV after it was prepared. And there's more. We checked the security cameras from the last 24 hours. There are 3 moments when Scarlett enters the room alone when there's no nurse nearby. In 2 of those instances, she is clearly seen manipulating the IV bag. We have visual evidence. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We had proof, real proof. Not just the audio recording, but also physical evidence and video. "Did you call the police yet?" I asked in a choked voice. Letitia shook her head. "Dr. Stevens is doing that right now, but there's a problem. Scarlett has legal rights as his wife. If she suspects anything, she can leave before the police arrive. She can destroy evidence. She can contact her lawyer and prepare a defense. We need to keep her here without her suspecting anything until the officers arrive." "How long?" 20 minutes. "Half an hour maximum. The nearest station is 10 minutes away, but they have to prepare the order. Come with specialized detectives. You have to go back in there and act like nothing happened. Keep her busy. Keep her talking. Do whatever it takes. 20 minutes, half an hour. An eternity when you're acting in front of someone who planned to kill your son." But I could do it. I had to do it. "There's something else," Letitia said and took out her phone again. While checking the cameras, we found this. It's from 3 days ago. She showed me a video recorded in black and white. It was Scarlett in the hospital parking lot talking on the phone. There was no audio, but I could see her body language. She was relaxed, almost happy. She was smiling. At one point, she even laughed. A woman whose husband is gravely ill doesn't laugh like that in the hospital parking lot, Letitia said with disgust. "We asked the tech department to try to read her lips or recover audio from the environment, but it's difficult." However, there's a moment when she looks directly toward a nearby camera without knowing it's there, and you can clearly read what she says. She paused the video at that exact moment and zoomed in on the image. Scarlett was saying something, and even though there was no sound, it was perfectly clear on her lips. "Soon, I'll be free. Soon, I'll be free." 3 words that confirmed everything that sealed her fate. That proved this wasn't worried love, but cold calculation. "This will also be given to the police," Letitia said, putting away the phone. "It's more ammunition, more evidence that this was premeditated, planned, executed with full awareness of what she was doing." I nodded, feeling something inside me harden. I was no longer just the desperate mother. I was no longer the foolish old woman who had been manipulated for years. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone willing to do whatever was necessary to protect her son. "I'm going back," I said with a firmness that surprised even myself. "I'm going to keep her there. And when the police arrive, I want to be present. I want to see her face when she realizes she lost, that her whole performance was in vain, that the stupid old woman wasn't so stupid after all." Letitia smiled for the first time since all this had begun. "You are stronger than you think, Doris. Your son is lucky to have you." Those words filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, purpose, power. I returned to the room with measured steps, controlling my breathing, preparing my final performance. Scarlett had already returned and was sitting in the same position holding Robert's hand, looking at him with that false expression of concern that I could now clearly see for what it was. "Everything all right?" she asked when I entered. "What did the doctor want?" "Just to check some paperwork." I lied with surprising ease. "Administrative things, nothing important." I sat in the chair on the other side of the bed and looked directly at her. It was time to play my most important role. "Scarlett, I need to tell you something." She looked up, her expression cautious. "What is it I've been unfair to you?" The words came out of my mouth like sweet poison. "All these years I've been cold, distant. I know you've felt it. I know you've tried to get close to me and I've rejected you again and again." I saw her eyes widen with genuine surprise. This wasn't what she expected. "That's not true," she started to say, but I interrupted her. "Yes, it is, and I want to apologize because now seeing my son like this, I realize that life is too short for stupid grudges, too short for silly pride." I leaned forward, taking her free hand in mine. She tensed slightly, but didn't pull away. "You are the woman my son chose, the woman who makes him happy, and I should have celebrated that instead of feeling jealous because that's what it was. You know jealousy, fear of losing him, Fear of no longer being the most important woman in his life. Every word was a perfect lie. Every sentence was a hook and she was biting. I could see it in how her eyes softened and how her posture relaxed. Doris, let me finish, please, I said, squeezing her hand. If Robert survives this and he has to survive, I want to start over with you. I want to be the mother-in-law you deserve. The grandmother your future children will need because you are going to have children, aren't you? You had talked about that. I saw something flicker in her eyes, discomfort, guilt perhaps, or simply the annoyance of having to keep acting when she already thought she had won. Yes, she finally said. We had talked about it after the business stabilized more, after we had more savings, more lies. There had never been plans for children, only plans for early widowhood and easy wealth. Well, when he gets out of here, I'm going to help you. I have some savings put away. It's not much, but it's something. Maybe I can help you with the down payment for a bigger house one with a yard for the kids. It would be my gift to you for the family you're going to build. I saw her eyes gleam for a second. Pure hard greed, even now, even in the middle of her master plan. The idea of more money excited her. You don't have to do that, Doris, she said softly, but her eyes said the opposite. Her eyes were screaming, give me more, give me everything, I want to. It's the least I can do after all these years of distance. Besides, I have no one else. When I die, everything I have will be Robert's anyway, and consequently yours too. Better to enjoy it together while I'm alive. Now I was selling myself out completely. I was painting myself as the foolish old woman with money that she had always believed I was. And it worked. I could see how she relaxed more and more, how the tension left her shoulders. She believed she had finally broken me, that she had finally won my trust. You are so generous, she said, and even squeezed my hand with what I suppose was meant to look like affection. Robert is very lucky to have you as a mother. I had to bite my tongue not to spit the truth at her right there. We kept talking about trivialities, invented memories, future plans that would never exist. I played my role as the repentant mother-in-law, and she played hers as the forgiving daughter-in-law. Two actresses on a small stage waiting for the curtain to fall. I looked at the clock discreetly. 15 minutes had passed. 5 more. Just 5 more minutes and the police would arrive. Just 5 more minutes and all this theater would end. You know what I would like, I said suddenly, as if it had just occurred to me. I would like it if when Robert wakes up, the first thing he sees is the 2 most important women in his life holding hands, united together for him. Scarlett smiled, and it was a smile so sweet, so false, so perfectly rehearsed. I would love that, Doris. I would love that. But then something changed in her expression. A shadow crossed her face. She stiffened and let go of my hand. What is that noise? She asked, turning her head toward the door. I heard it too then. Voices in the hallway. Many voices. Quick footsteps, the unmistakable sound of urgent activity. And then the door burst open. 4 people entered. 2 uniformed police officers, a woman in a suit who was clearly a detective, and behind them, Letitia and Dr. Stevens. Scarlett jumped to her feet, her eyes wide. What is going on? She asked. And for the first time since I had known her, her voice sounded genuinely scared. The detective stepped forward, showing her badge, Scarlett Fernandez of Salazar. I am Detective Audrey Ruiz. I need you to come with us to answer some questions about your husband's condition. Questions? What kind of questions? My husband is sick. He had a collapse. What does that have to do with the police? Her voice rose in pitch, becoming sharper, more desperate. The mask was beginning to crack. We have found evidence that Mr. Robert Salazar has been the victim of intentional and sustained poisoning. Toxicological analysis shows dangerous levels of wherein in his system a substance that was not prescribed to him and was deliberately added to his hospital treatment. The silence that followed was deafening. Scarlett remained completely motionless, her mouth slightly open, her eyes darting from the detective to the officers, to Letitia, calculating, looking for a way out. That's ridiculous, she finally said, and her voice was now pure ice. The sweetness had disappeared completely. It's a mistake, a medical error. Someone mixed up the medications. That happens all the time in hospitals. It is not a mistake. Dr. Stevens intervened, stepping forward. We have security camera footage that shows you manipulating your husband's IV bag on 3 different occasions. We have physical evidence of the substance found. And we have this. Letitia took out her phone and played the recording. Scarlett's voice filled the room clear as water. I've been giving him the crushed pills and his orange juice in the mornings a little more each week. The doctors think it's stress. No one suspects anything. Here at the hospital, it's easier. I can add things to the IV. In 2 or 3 more days, it will all be over. I watched as the color completely drained from her face, as her legs trembled as she desperately searched for something to say, some excuse, some lie that could save her. But there was nothing. They had caught her completely. That recording was taken out of context. She tried, but her voice lacked conviction. That's not what it looks like. We also have your conversation with your lawyer, Mark Delgado, who, by the way, is being interrogated right now, Detective Audrey continued in a firm professional voice. We have documents showing attempts at fraudulent property transfer. We have your internet search history for undetectable poisons and poisoning symptoms. We have enough evidence to charge you with premeditated attempted murder and fraud. Scarlett looked at me then, her green eyes once so beautiful now filled with pure hatred. It was you, she hissed like a snake. You did this meddling old woman, old witch. You couldn't just keep quiet and let things run their course. You had to stick your nose where it didn't belong. I stood up slowly, walking toward her with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. I stood in front of her, looking her directly in the eyes. I am his mother, I said in a low voice but full of power. And a mother always protects her children. Always. You thought you could fool me. You thought I was a stupid old woman with money. You thought you could steal everything from me, kill my son, and get away with it. But you were wrong. You were gravely wrong. Scarlett Fernandez, one of the officers, said, taking out the handcuffs, You are under arrest for attempted murder in the 1st degree. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be assigned to you. The handcuffs made that characteristic metallic sound as they closed around her wrists. She resisted at first, yelling that it was a mistake, that she was being unfairly accused, that her lawyer would sue them all. But the officers were professional. They held her firmly and began to lead her out of the room. Just before crossing the door, she turned to look at me one last time. You think you won. She spat with venom in every word. But he'll never believe you when he wakes up. I'm gonna tell him you made everything up, that you're jealous, that you're crazy, and he's gonna believe me. He always believes me. I smiled not with joy, but with the satisfaction of someone who knows she has the last card. It no longer matters what he believes. Justice does not depend on his opinion. It depends on the evidence, and the evidence condemns you. They took her out. Then her screams echoing down the hallway until they faded into the distance. I stood there trembling from head to toe, feeling all the adrenaline that had kept me standing for the last hour finally leave me. My legs gave way and Letitia ran to support me, helping me sit down before I fell. It's over, she whispered, hugging me. It's over. You did amazingly. You saved your son. But I couldn't celebrate yet because Robert was still unconscious in that bed. Robert was still full of poison. Robert was still fighting for his life. Doctor, I said in a shaky voice. Looking at Stevens, my son, is he going to be okay? Were you able to? We started the detoxification treatment as soon as we confirmed the were, and he explained in a reassuring voice. High doses of vitamin K to counteract the anticoagulant fresh plasma transfusions. His body is young and strong. He has very good chances of a full recovery. Very good chances. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. And hope was more than I had had just 2 hours ago. I approached my son's bed and took his hand again, squeezing it tightly. Fight, my love, I whispered. Fight for your life. Your mom already did her part. Now it's up to you. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I didn't leave the hospital. I couldn't. Letitia got me a special pass to stay in Robert's room 24 hours a day. She brought me coffee sandwiches that I barely tasted, blankets when I shivered from the cold in the early morning. She had become more than a nurse. She was my guardian angel, my savior, the sister I never had. Dr. Stevens came every few hours to check Robert's vital signs, to adjust medications, to patiently explain every small change in his condition to me. His levels are improving, he would tell me, showing me graphs I barely understood. But that sounded like celestial music. The treatment is working. His body is responding. It's just a matter of time. Time. That word had become my religion. Every minute that passed was a minute further from the poison. Every hour was a small victory against the death that Scarlett had planned so coldly. I sat next to his bed and talked to him. I told him stories from when he was a child about the time he got lost in the supermarket, and I found him crying in the cereal aisle about his first day of school when he clung to my leg, unwilling to let go. About all the Christmases, the birthdays, the small moments that build a life. You have to wake up. I told him over and over, you have to wake up because there is still so much to live for. So much you haven't done. You can't leave like this. You can't leave me like this. Sometimes his eyelids trembled. Sometimes his fingers moved slightly, and I clung to those signs like a castaway to a piece of wood. Detective Audrey came to see me on the second day. She brought a truly decent coffee, not the watery kind from the hospital machine, and sat with me in that silent room. "I wanted to update you on the case," she said in a professional but kind voice. "Scarlett is being held without bail. The charges are serious. Attempted murder, fraud, tampering with evidence. Her lawyer, Mark Delgado, is cooperating with us in exchange for a reduced sentence. He has confessed to the entire plan, the property transfers. They were preparing the falsified documents, everything." I nodded, feeling a dark satisfaction I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "How much time will she serve in prison if we convict her on all counts? We are talking about between 25 and 30 years minimum. And with the evidence we have, it's almost impossible for her to be acquitted. 25 to 30 years, an entire lifetime. Enough time for her beauty to fade behind bars. Enough time for her to pay for every drop of poison she gave my son." "There is something else you should know," Audrey continued, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "We investigated her past. Scarlett is not her real name. Her name is Karen Fields. She has a record in 2 different states for fraud and scams. She marries men with money, manipulates them into taking their assets, and then disappears. Your son was not her first victim. He was the 4th. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. 4th. Robert was her 4th victim." "The others, I couldn't finish the question." Audrey shook her head. "The other 3 survived, but they lost everything. Houses, businesses, savings. One of them tried to report her, but she had been so careful with the paperwork that they couldn't prove anything. He declared bankruptcy and fled to another state. She changed her name, changed her appearance, and started over with your son. She finally made a mistake. She was too ambitious, too impatient, and thanks to that we caught her. She showed me photos. Scarlett with a different hair color, Scarlett with a different style, but the same cold eyes, the same calculating smile." "These men want to testify," Audrey said. "They want to tell their stories. They are going to help build a pattern of behavior that will make it impossible for her to claim this was a misunderstanding or a mistake. She is a professional predator, and she is finally going to pay for everything." I looked at my son sleeping in that bed and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with rage. Gratitude because I had saved him in time. Rage because I had been so close to losing him, so close to her winning. "Thank you," I told Audrey. "Thank you for taking this seriously, for investigating, for not letting her get away with it." She squeezed my hand. "It's my job, but more than that, it's my duty. Women like her cannot continue destroying lives. Your bravery in acting fast and trusting Letitia and staying calm, that is what truly saved your son. You are a hero, Doris." Hero. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like an exhausted mother who had done the only thing she knew how to do: protect her son. That was all. On the 3rd day, just as the sun began to stream through the room window, filling it with a golden warm light, It happened. Robert's fingers moved. It wasn't an unconscious tremor. It was a deliberate movement. He squeezed my hand. I shouted for the nurses without letting go of his hand. Letitia came running, followed by another nurse, and then Dr. Stevens. "He's waking up," the doctor said, checking his eyes with a small flashlight. "Robert, if you can hear me, squeeze your mother's hand again." And he did. He squeezed my hand harder this time. Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. "My love," I whispered over and over, "you're here. You're alive. You're okay." His eyelids began to move slowly as if they weighed tons. They opened. His eyes, those brown eyes I had seen since the day he was born, looked at me confusedly, at first lost, but then they focused. He recognized me. "Mom," he whispered in a hoarse, barely audible voice. That single word broke all the barriers I had built. I collapsed onto the bed, crying against his chest, feeling his hand weakly rise to touch my hair. "I'm here," I said between sobs. "I'm here, my love. You are safe. Everything is going to be all right." Dr. Stevens gave us a few minutes before starting the examinations. He checked his reflexes, his vision, his cognitive ability. He asked simple questions: name, date of birth, where he lived. Robert answered everything correctly, though slowly searching for the words. "There is no apparent brain damage," the doctor finally announced with a smile. "It's a miracle considering the amount of toxins in his system, but he's young, strong, and the treatment came just in time." Just in time, thanks to Letitia. Thanks to that extraordinary nurse who had trusted her instinct, who had seen what no one else saw. Robert looked around the room confused. "What happened?" he asked. "Why am I here?" The last thing I remember is being at the office and feeling sick. And then, nothing. I sat in the chair next to his bed, taking his hand in mine. This was the moment I had dreaded the moment to tell him the truth. The truth about the woman he had married, the woman who had slept next to him for 7 years while planning his death. "Robert, there's something you need to know," I began in a soft but firm voice. "Something terrible, but I need you to listen to me until the end. Can you do that?" He nodded, though I could see the fear growing in his eyes. Fear of what he was about to hear. Fear of a truth he probably already suspected in some deep corner of his mind. I told him everything from the moment I ran to the hospital until Letitia hid me. I told him about the conversation I overheard about Scarlett and the lawyer, about the poison in his orange juice, about the wear-in in his IV bag, about the 7 years of lies about the other 3 victims, about the plan to take everything and leave him to die as if it were just another accident. I watched as his face went through every possible emotion. Disbelief at first, denial, anger, pain, and finally a sadness so deep it broke my heart to see it. "It can't be," he whispered when I finished. "Scarlett, no. She loves me. She has always been there for me. She took care of me when I was tired. She prepared my juice every morning. He stopped. He heard his own words. The juice every morning, exactly as she had confessed in the recording. "Do you want to hear the recording?" I asked softly. Nurse Letitia recorded everything, her complete confession. He shook his head violently. "No, I don't want to. I can't." He cried. Then my adult son, my strong man, cried as I hadn't seen him cry since he was a child. He cried for the betrayal, for the lost years, for the love he had believed was real and never existed. I climbed onto the bed carefully and hugged him as I had done 1,000 times when he was little. When he fell off his bike, when a kid bothered him at school, when his first love rejected him. I had always been there to pick up the pieces. And here I was again. "I'm sorry," I said, even though I wasn't the one who should apologize. "I'm sorry you had to go through this. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. I'm sorry I was so blind." "It wasn't your fault," he murmured against my shoulder. "I didn't see anything either. I lived with her. I slept next to her. I told her my dreams, my fears, my plans, and all the time." He didn't finish the sentence. "There was no need. I loved her. Mom," he continued after a while, "or at least I loved the person I thought she was. How could I have been so stupid? How did I not see the signs? Because that's how people like her operate," I said softly. They are experts in manipulation, in making you believe exactly what they want you to believe. You weren't stupid. You were human. You trusted because that's what good people do. They trust. We stayed like that for a long time, mother and son survivors of a storm that almost destroyed both of us. Mom, he finally said, pulling back a little to look me in the eyes. She said things about you, didn't she? All these years, she said things that made me pull away from you. I nodded slowly. I didn't want to put more burden on him, but I needed the truth between us. Yes, I guess so. You started to change with me about 3 years ago. More distant, colder, as if my presence bothered you. He closed his eyes in shame. She told me you were controlling, that you wanted to separate us, that you spoke badly about her behind her back, that you gave her expensive gifts just to make her feel bad, to show that she couldn't afford those luxuries. Every time I mentioned visiting you, she would cry. She would say you made her feel inferior, that you would never accept her. And I believed her. God, I was such an idiot. No, I said firmly, you weren't an idiot. You loved your wife and you wanted to protect her. That makes you a good person, not an idiot. She twisted that love. She used it as a weapon against you, against us. I treated you so badly, Mom. I canceled lunches. I forgot your birthday. I made you feel unwelcome in my own house, in the house you bought with your money. My God. His voice broke again. How can you even look at me now? How can you be here after everything I put you through? I took his face in both hands, forcing him to look at me. Because you are my son. Because I love you more than my own life. Because a mother doesn't abandon. No matter how much it hurts, no matter how many times she is rejected, she will always, always be there when her son needs her. He cried again, and I cried with him. For the lost years, for the unspoken words, for all the times I had wanted to call him and didn't, because I knew it would annoy him, for all the nights I had gone to bed wondering what I had done wrong, for all the unnecessary pain we had both carried. Detective Audrey came later that day to take Robert's statement. It was difficult. He had to remember details he would rather forget. The mornings he woke up feeling weak, the times Scarlett insisted he take his vitamins, that he drink her special juice. The nights she told him he looked tired, that he was working too hard, that he needed more rest. Everything had been part of the plan. Every gesture of concern was actually another step towards his death. There's something you need to know, Audrey said when she finished taking notes. The house that is in your name, the one your mother bought. Scarlett had initiated the transfer procedures, but we stopped them in time. The property is still yours. We also froze all the bank accounts and blocked any access she had. Your money is safe. Robert looked at me with an expression of absolute horror. Mom, your money. Dad's inheritance, the $180,000. I almost lost everything, but you didn't lose it, I said firmly. We saved it. Both of us saved it. And about the business, Audrey continued. The $200,000 your mother invested plus the accumulated profits, everything is protected. Scarlett had no legal rights to any of it. Because even though it was in accounts in his name, you never made her the official beneficiary. It was an oversight on your part, but that oversight saved you from losing everything. An oversight. Or maybe deep down Robert had always known something wasn't right. Maybe a part of him never completely trusted her. We will need you to testify at the trial. The detective said, I know it's difficult, but your testimony is crucial. You're the direct victim. Your word carries weight. Robert nodded. Though pale, I'll do it. I want her to pay. I want her to pay for everything. The following days were of slow but steady recovery. Robert improved every day. Color returned to his face. Strength returned to his muscles. The doctors were amazed at how quickly he healed once the toxins were eliminated from his system. Letitia came to visit him every shift. They had become friends in that strange bond that forms between people who go through something traumatic together. I owe you my life, Robert told her every time. To you and my mother. I was just doing my job, she always replied modestly. But we both knew she had done much more than that. She had risked her career. She had trusted her instinct when everyone else ignored it. She had been brave when it would have been easier to stay quiet. A week after waking up, Robert was finally strong enough to sit in a chair by the window. He looked out towards the city that kept moving without knowing the drama that had unfolded in this room. "Mom," he said without turning to look at me, "when I get out of here, I want to make things right. I want to give you back your money, every single penny with interest." "You don't need to," I started, but he raised his hand. "Yes, I do need to. I need to make it right. I need to show you that I am not that man who ignored you for 3 years, that I am not that son who forgot where he came from. I need to show myself, too." I walked over and sat in the chair next to him. "You don't have to show me anything. You already did. You survived. You're here. That's all I need. But I need more." He insisted, finally turning to look at me. "I need to get myself back. The man I was before her. The son you were proud to raise. You'll help me find him again." I took his hand and squeezed it hard. "Always, my love. Always." The trial was 6 months later. 6 months in which Robert recovered completely. In which he closed wounds he thought would never heal, in which he learned to trust again, starting by trusting himself. 6 months in which our relationship was rebuilt from the foundations stronger than before, more honest than ever. We entered that courthouse together, arm in arm. He in a gray suit that made him look like the successful man he was. Me in an olive green dress that I had bought especially for the occasion. Not out of vanity, but because I wanted to look strong. I wanted her to see that she hadn't been able to destroy me. Scarlett was sitting at the defense table. She looked different. Her hair had lost its shine. Her skin looked pale under the artificial court lights, but her eyes were still the same cold calculating. When she saw us enter, something dark crossed her face. Pure hatred. There were no more masks. There were no more performances. This was the real Karen Fields, the predator hiding behind the false name of Scarlett. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. The audio recordings where she confessed everything, the security videos showing her manipulating the IV bag, the toxicological analyses, the testimonies of the other 3 men she had previously scammed. Every piece of evidence was another nail in her legal coffin. Letitia testified about how she had noticed the symptoms, about her suspicions about the investigation she had done risking her job. Doctor. Stevens explained in precise medical terms how the wearer-in had been destroying Robert's body from the inside, how without intervention he would have died in a matter of days. Detective Audrey presented all the evidence of the fraud, the falsified documents, Karen's criminal history under her multiple identities. It was devastating. One by one, the pillars of her defense crumbled. Her lawyer tried to argue that the recordings had been obtained illegally, that the testimonies were circumstantial, that everything could be explained as a series of tragic misunderstandings. But no one believed him. The evidence was too solid, too clear, too damning. Then they called me to the stand. I sat in that hard wooden chair, looking at the jury, the judge, the entire courtroom full of strangers who had come to witness this drama. Mrs. Doris, the prosecutor, began, "Can you tell us in your own words what you heard that day at the hospital?" And I told him everything. From my desperation running down that hallway to the moment Letitia hid me. From every venomous word that had come out of that woman's mouth to the moment I understood that my son was being slowly murdered. My voice broke several times. Tears rolled down my cheeks uncontrollably. But I kept talking because my son deserved to be heard. Because the other victims deserved justice. Because no other mother should go through this hell. "And how did you feel when you heard that your son was being poisoned?" the prosecutor asked. I looked directly at Karen when I answered. I felt like the world was ending. But I also felt rage. A rage I didn't know existed inside me. Rage that someone could be so wicked, so calculating, so cold. Rage for having trusted her, for having welcomed her into my family, for having believed she loved my son when all the time she only saw numbers, dollars, property power. "Is there anything else you wish to say?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want the jury to know that this woman is not the victim of a misunderstanding. She is a professional predator. She has deliberately destroyed lives. And if you don't stop her here, she will continue to do it. The next victim could be someone else, another mother's son. And perhaps that mother won't be as lucky as I was. Perhaps no one will notice the signs in time. Please don't give her that opportunity." The defense attorney tried to discredit me in the cross-examination. He suggested I was jealous of my son's relationship, that I had made everything up out of spite that the recordings could have been edited. But every question he asked, I answered with calmness and truth. Then they called Robert. Seeing him walk toward that stand strong and alive when he should have been dead was one of the most powerful moments of my life. He testified about the years of marriage, about how she had systematically isolated him from me, about the symptoms he had ignored, thinking they were stress, about the orange juice she lovingly prepared for him every morning, about how he felt worse and worse. But she convinced him that he just needed rest, that the doctors were exaggerating, that everything would be fine. "Did you love her?" the prosecutor asked. "I loved the person I thought she was," Robert replied firmly. "But that person never existed. It was a mask. A character designed to manipulate me, to steal from me, to kill me." "And now, do you feel anything for her now?" Robert looked directly at her for the first time since the trial began. "Pity," he finally said. "Pity that someone can live like that without real love, without genuine connections, just calculating, always calculating. What an empty life that must be." I saw something flicker in Karen's eyes. For the first time since everything began, I saw her genuinely affected not by guilt, but by the contempt in Robert's voice. The contempt of someone who no longer feared her. The jury deliberations lasted less than 3 hours. When they returned, the judge asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," the foreman replied. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of aggravated fraud, guilty. On the charge of falsification of documents, guilty. On all charges presented, we find her guilty." The gavel fell. The sound echoed in that courtroom like thunder. Karen didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sat there rigid as the officers approached. The sentence was 32 years in prison with no possibility of parole before serving 20. 32 years. Enough time for all her beauty to fade away. Enough time for her to pay for every life she had destroyed. As they were taking her out of the room, she stopped next to our table. She looked at Robert and me with those green eyes full of venom. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll find a way out." "And when I do, you won't." Robert interrupted her with absolute calm. "And even if you did, I don't care anymore. You no longer have any power over me. You're just another criminal on her way to prison. Nothing special, nothing memorable, nothing." It was the final blow, watching her ego crumble, watching the reality of her situation finally catch up with her. They took her out then, and it was the last time we saw her. Outside the courthouse, a group of reporters was waiting for us. Robert had decided to speak publicly about what had happened. He wanted to warn others. He wanted his story to serve a purpose. "My name is Robert Salazar," he began in front of the cameras. "And I almost died at the hands of the woman I married. But I am here today thanks to 3 incredible people. Leticia Sanchez, a nurse who trusted her instinct. Dr. Stevens, who took her concerns seriously. And my mother, Doris, who never gave up on me, even though I had pushed her out of my life. He searched for me in the crowd and extended his hand. I walked over and took it. Mom, forgive me for the lost years, for the ignored calls, for the forgotten birthdays, for making you feel like you weren't important. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "You already did," I said with tears in my eyes. "You survived. That's all I needed." 3 months later, we sold the house. That house I had bought with so much love now only contained bitter memories. With that money, Robert bought a new apartment, smaller but full of light. And with the rest, we did something I had never imagined. We created a foundation. It's called Vigilant Mothers and is dedicated to helping families who have been victims of fraud or domestic abuse. We provide free legal advice, psychological support, temporary shelter if necessary. Leticia is part of the team. She helps identify signs of poisoning or abuse in medical settings. She trains other nurses to trust their instincts. In the first year, we helped 17 families, 17 stories that could have ended in tragedy, but found help in time. And I Doris, the old woman they thought was invisible, became the voice of those who couldn't speak. I give talks in hospitals and community centers anywhere that invites me. I tell my story without shame because the shame is not mine. It belongs to the predators who hide behind charming smiles. Today, as I write these lines from my new apartment with an ocean view, one I bought for myself with my own recovered savings, I feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My son comes over for lunch every Sunday. We cook together. We laugh together. We plan the future together. We made up for lost time not by living in the past, but by building something new. And when I look back at that horrible night in the hospital, at that moment when I heard murder plans whispered in a hallway, I no longer feel just pain. I feel gratitude because that night I discovered something about myself that I didn't know existed. I discovered that I am stronger than I thought, braver than I imagined, more powerful than anyone, including myself, had ever believed. I am Doris. I am 66 years old, and finally, after a lifetime of giving, I learned to fight. And I won.